We are really moving out of the era of knowledge work into the era of learning work, and particularly in software development.
Welcome to the LabVIEW Experiment. I am your host, Sam Taggart from SAS Workshops. In my 15 years of working with and training developers, I've had the opportunity to conduct a lot of experiments. Over here, we believe in embracing failure as the essential learning experience that it is. And what better way to learn than from other people's mistakes? In this podcast, I talk to industry experts, colleagues, and friends about their failures and how they have turned them into future successes. Welcome back to the LabVIEW Experiment. I am here today with Diana Larsen. I've heard your name many times because obviously, you put yourself out there. But I had the pleasure of meeting you recently with Denver Agile or Mile High Agile or something.
Yeah. We had the backyard barbecue party. Yes, that was memorable.
Llewellyn is.
Yeah.
I feel like every community has one person who's like the nexus who like knows everybody and always hosts all the events. And Llewellyn
Yeah.
definitely can be that person for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I met a lot of interesting people through Llewellyn. So
Mhm.
we had a few interesting conversations, and I thought I'd invite you on. Also, I recently read your book that you wrote with Trisha, Lead Without Blame. I had Trisha on here, and we talked about it. At the time, I was only partway through the book, so I hadn't finished it. So I've
Yeah.
got lots of questions and topics that I want to discuss about that.
Oh, yay. I love that. Yeah.
What for the book, actually, why don't you just start with your like 30-second elevator pitch or whatever it is about the book and what it's about, and then I'll get into some of the things that I picked up from it.
So the book is focused on leaders at every level of the organization, but anybody who other people follow, whether because they have a particular job title or because they just see them as influential or experienced or whatever, other people follow. That's a leader. And we often can trade places as leaders. We can be part of a group where one person is in leadership role one time, another person is in leadership role another time based on their expertise or whatever. So it's broader than just leaders who have titles, but
Mhm.
it definitely includes leaders who have titles and their role in creating work environments for success.
Yeah.
Um, some I've been called a visionary pragmatic, and I've been called a pragmatic visionary. So I I like the big ideas, but I also like to see results get done, right? So we want to see leaders and their people that are there working with be successful in their organizations. And Trisha and I had learned some things about how that doesn't work in our work with different organizations, and we wanted to sort of point people more toward the positive about what things do work, particularly when people are leading teams. And of course, it comes somewhat out of our backgrounds in the Agile community, but it fits for anybody who's in that role. If you have a team of people that you are leading, or you are a part of a team of people, and you occasionally are in a leadership role there, this book is for you. It is how do we rethink what motivates people, what our role is in creating those motivational environments or those environments where people will motivate themselves, and what are some of the factors that are involved in that. The characteristics of leaders who can do that, and then the factors that are involved in that. So
Yeah, you hit
that,
on a very interesting topic. I think a lot of times people confuse leadership with titles.
yeah,
And yeah, you can have the title and not be a leader, and you cannot have a title and be a leader.
yeah, yeah.
Sometimes, sometimes people ask me like, "Oh, I want to be a leader," and blah blah blah. And I'm like, "Great, go get some followers." Like that's all you need. You just need
Yeah,
one person who's like,
yeah,
"Hey, okay, that sounds like a
for,
good idea. Let's go do it."
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing that I point out, so you had a quote something about learning is not a separate activity from production, which struck me very strongly. So
Yeah.
I remember. I when work was slow at one point, I worked for a friend of mine who did construction stuff, and he would always never say no to a job. He would say yes to a job. He'd be like, "Oh yeah, I can go fix your sink or whatever." And he had no clue what he was doing. But on the way to the job site, he was looking on YouTube and looking at the videos and stuff. And I always remember that. I thought that was kind of funny. But I feel like in the software industry, there's so many different tools that you need to know. And as a consultant, I've had this happen a few times where I go interview with a potential client, and they're looking for 4 or 5 different skills, and I've got 4 of the skills, but one of the things I've never used before. And as soon as I say that, it's like conversation's over.
Yeah,
And I'm wondering, well, A, if you've ever been in that position and how to get around that.
right.
Uh, and then B, just your thoughts on that whole dynamic.
Right. Well, I think that's misguided
Mhm.
to say you've learned these four things and you're doing them well, and we also need this fifth thing. There's no hope that you could possibly learn it to use it here. Well, that's ridiculous. Of course, you've got this experience learning things as a learner who steps up and gets the skills and knows how to use the tools that you've needed in the past. Why wouldn't you do that here? And so maybe it's a focus that, let's make sure you get the opportunity to learn about this other thing because you seem well suited in these other ways. I think what we have to do, the world is moving so fast that we can't rely on past knowledge. Even things we've already done that we think we already know, sometimes we have to unlearn. And so we need to know how to learn quickly to suit emerging conditions. And we need to know when we need to change our minds and maybe learn something new. Both of those things are important right now because the world is changing so fast. Technologies are changing. I mean, people who were complacent, I'm a senior engineer. I know my tool set. I know what my cloud is. I know what, blah, blah, blah. And then AI comes along, right? Well, does that person become irrelevant? Or does that person step up and say, oh, well, now in my job, I need to use this particular AI tool or this particular LLM. And so I need to go about learning that.
Yeah.
And if I can do that together with my other teammates, the
Mhm.
other people I'm working with, then we all get better. Right. And if I share, well, I don't think I know enough about this thing, but I really want to learn about it. Anybody else here know something that I need to know? That, and in the book, we call that co-intelligence. How are we building our team co-intelligence? How do we make sure that we know the things are learning the things we need to, that the moment is telling us we need to learn? And then how are we making sure that we spread that learning across so that we have redundancy on our team? It's risky if one person is the only person on the team who knows how to do a thing. Now, they may be the person on the team that has the most robust expertise, and that's okay, that happens. But when people talk about T-shaped people or pie-shaped people or M-shaped people or whatever, they're talking about people who not only have depth in some areas, but can also learn
Mhm.
other important areas. And my particular mantra is we are really moving out of the era of knowledge work into the era of learning work, and particularly in software development, because it's a continuous learning activity. We've got to learn what is this thing you want us to build? What's the new thing you want that to do? Who is this new user of that? What do I need to know about them and their environment and their conditions? We built some of it. What's that system doing now? Let's learn from the system we've already got and how we need to change it. It'll tell us how we need to change it, particularly if we're doing TDD and some really good engineering practices. So, I mean, and how do I interact with my teammates for all of us to be successful? So that it's just constant learning. And some of it's technical learning, some of it's interpersonal learning, some of it's organizational learning, some of it's environmental learning, but we're surrounded with not only the opportunities to learn, but the mandates to learn. And when interviewers ignore the uh, someone's ability to learn new things, they're that they're making choices at their own peril. If they're only going to rely on what you knew up until yesterday, but not how you're going to learn things from now on, they're in trouble.
I see a lot of companies making that mistake. And I think one of
Yeah,
the assumptions is that if I hire a really experienced person, I don't have to onboard them, which I think it blows my mind because
yeah,
even if that person is the expert at whatever technology you're using, they
right,
don't know all the intricacies of how you use it. They don't know your organization.
right,
They don't know the problem domains really well. They don't know all your internal terminology and acronyms
right,
and all that stuff. So there's
right,
always learning going on when you hire anybody, no matter who they are. Even if you get them from a competitor, right?
right,
Same industry, same technology, you do things slightly differently. They still have to learn your way of doing things.
right. Absolutely. And that's how you you look at the people that you, as a leader, you look at the people you have and you optimize the capability of that group of people so that you're getting the most and getting the best from the people that you have. And and to do that, you put conditions in the environment that help them do that learning and help foster resilience in those people so that if a new challenge comes along, they're not thrown by it. They just say, "Oh, well, now I guess we have to learn about that," right? So there's a lot of reasons to be focused more on what you are capable of learning and how fast you are capable of learning and recognizing when you need to learn something new than on just your past knowledge. I mean, you build on your past knowledge, so it's not like that's not important, but it's not sufficient. It's not the only thing. And I that's a it's a problem. It's a problem right now.
So, as a related topic, there's something that comes up on the internet a lot. And
Hmm.
I run into this because I sell training courses, right?
Yeah.
And there's always this tension, I feel like, between am I responsible for my own personal development or is the business responsible for helping me develop? And I mean, it's always framed as this binary. I think it's like a both and. But
Yes.
selling courses, it's always like, do I price it? Because like if the business is going to pay for it, they've got a lot more money. They can afford to invest in their employee. But if I'm trying to get the employee to buy it on their own, right, they're much more price conscious. And so I always run into this like, I'm curious your thoughts on that whole dichotomy.
Right, right. Well, yeah, I think you're right. It's a yes and, it's a both and,
Hmm.
right? It's not only the organization's responsibility because because the skills that you learn are portable. You get to take them with you, which is why big layoffs oftentimes don't really make that much sense. And why, these people have been developed. Why are you moving them on? Why don't you use that knowledge that they've gained and that ability to learn? So on the organization side, you want people who can learn fast. And so you want to invest in their development because that helps them become better learners, right? But on the other hand, sometimes conditions are just such that a company, for whatever reason, can't hold on to all their people, or they need new people, or whatever. And so you need to equip yourself with, you need to really think deeply about what's the kind of work I want to do, and am I well prepared for that? And do I know how to learn in that domain area? Maybe I only want to work for nonprofits. Well, what do I know about nonprofits? Maybe I only want to work for software as a service companies. Well, what is there about that I need to know? And what are the tools that seem to be most often used there? That's to your benefit. And so I do think it's a both and I think it's an imperative for both the organization and the individual. And for either one of those to walk away from that responsibility leaves a gap, leaves a gap that's really difficult to overcome.
So that brings me to a next question, and that is, there is so much to learn out there, right? There's so
Yeah,
many tools
right.
and so many different directions you could go. Do you have any thoughts or ideas on how do you prioritize which things to learn? Uh, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think you want to follow your own interests because it's the things that you have some enthusiasm and interest in that are going to be the things you bring the most energy for learning to, right? So there's that, but also, what's on the horizon? What
Yeah.
if I'm moving in this direction, what do I see out there that's going to be needed here? And in organizations too, looking ahead at our strategy or our direction, what kinds of things are we moving into new markets? Are we moving into are there new needs that we are uncovering that we hadn't seen before? Is there globalization happening, whatever that might be, there's always opportunities there
Mhm.
so for what are we going to learn and how do we prioritize that? And that, like in my own learning, it's like, what do I want? I've got a whole list all the time about about things I could be learning next. And the way I manage it is I choose the things I I'm feel most compelled toward, because those are the things I'm going to be able to talk about that I'm really interested in learning them and so on. So that's my first step in prioritization. But then secondarily, what does my environment need from me?
Mhm.
Right. And that's the next thing because I want to be a good employee, community member, family member, whatever that is, what does that say to me that what does my community need? What does my company need for me to know and learn? Because I want to be a good member of that society, whatever that is. So those two things together, I think, help us pick a direction. And or uh, is there something I learned in the past that isn't really working for me anymore, but it's pretty central to what I do? Sometimes that need to unlearn and replace that with something new, it becomes really important. So there's a lot of choice points there, and nobody can make that judgment for somebody else. But I would hope that if there are leader report kind of conversations going on, um, the sort of the developmental annual review as opposed to the punishment annual, the judgmental annual review. It's like, what new learning goals do you want to set for yourself? What's out there that you think you need, that you think that you and us as an organization would benefit from of doing? And then making sure that there's some support there to the extent that there are the resources available to do that. I mean, everybody has to work within their budgets and their resources. So, but often team members can learn from each other. You could just as a team, you could decide, well, why don't you go do this and you go do that, and then your job is go learn those things and then bring them back and teach the rest of us, right? So there are ways that you can defray those costs, or that expenditure of resources, whether it's time or money or effort or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, I think you mentioned one key point there, and that was the unlearning thing. I think, some people say like, oh, it's always about learning and doing new things and adding
Yeah.
to your toolbox, but also sometimes stopping doing some of those things that are holding you back. And that I think is much more challenging. It's always you mentioned enthusiasm. People are always much more enthusiastic about chasing new shiny things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like right now, you mentioned earlier retrospectives. Um, a lot of people learned Esther and I bear some responsibility for this, that they could or should, I don't like the word should word, but they could do a retrospective at the end of every sprint, right? That
Mhm.
that was the appropriate time to do a retrospective because that's what it said in the book. And that's what Scrum says, and that's what, whatever that is. Well, time has moved on and people are mobbing or they're using Kanban instead of Scrum, or I mean, there are many different ways that sort of interrupts that, well, at the end of the sprint, right?
Mhm.
So, what if we decided to do that less frequently and say learn how to work in Pomodoros and do a little tiny retrospective at the end of every Pomodoros, like the Pomodoro book recommends, right? Let's unlearn this idea that we have to do a bigger retrospective at the end and go to the much smaller, more frequent steps of doing small retrospectives, making small improvements more frequently, and then at some point in time looking back over that pattern. What kinds of things what improvements have we made, and do we just see any trends there or any improvements there? Because that might give you some additional information. Doing the overview and not only looking at the 25 minutes of a Pomodoro or the time between we start work and we have our first coffee break or whatever kind of cadence that you choose. But that's an example. We learned how to do retrospectives at the end of a sprint, but if we stop really relying on the sprint structure, how do we still get continuous improvement going? Well, we could look for some of these other opportunities.
Yeah, I do want to talk more about retrospectives, but I want to go back just
Yeah,
slightly to the talk about learning new things. And
yeah,
I'm very big on like the practicality, pragmatic of like, hey, I'm doing this new thing at work. I need to learn this new technology. Like that makes total sense to me.
yeah,
But I feel like we miss out sometimes because we get stuck in this incremental loop instead of doing this discovery and discovering like a whole new tool or a whole new way of doing things.
yeah.
Do you have any advice on how to break out of that? Just like we're just going along, we're just gradually, incrementally improving this thing, but there's really like a big sea change that's needed.
Yeah, well, I mean that happens. You're right. That does happen through discovery, but it doesn't always happen in big leaps. And so you look for the little indicators. I'm a big one for paying attention to, if we think in terms of systems, it's the small signals the small new signals that the system is providing us. And what are they telling us? And is there, um, I mean, like I know people who started paying attention to all kinds of artificial intelligence, LLMs, machine learning, all of it, right? Much earlier on than the rest of us did. What did they see that we didn't see that caused them to start paying attention to that, right? And it may have been something in their company, but it may have just been them noticing some other kind of change. So that ability to take the time to sort of notice, put your head up, not just down in the work all the time, but put your head up and say, how are things different than they were before? And what am I noticing about that? And how does that? And some people do that more naturally than others. So that's why it's great to have a team. Right? Some of your teammates are going to be more adept at sort of seeing those signals and or paying attention to those signals, and others aren't. And that's okay. That's just a difference, right? But but we need to be able to take that in at some level sometimes. And 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 the more we think about things in small increments, the more we are able to sort of pick up on the things that are going to give us the big improvements. And it very often, I mean, in the chaos theory, complexity theory world, they talk about the butterfly effect, right? That a very small action in one place, butterfly flapping its wings in Singapore or whatever,
Yeah.
right? results in hurricanes somewhere else in the world, right? Because this small thing gets amplified and over time it becomes a big thing. So if we can watch the small things that are interesting to us and then pay attention to what happens with them, we can begin to track, oh, where is that headed? And should I pay more attention to that or less attention to that? And this is thinking in terms of complex systems, right? So it's one of the things that we recommend in the Lead Without Blame book. The four things that we ask about learning leaders is that you have the courage to support learning, you have the compassion to understand that learning is hard for people and they might need some space for that. You have the confidence that you've given people what they need to do the learning they need, and you understand the complexity of the whole system. And so those are all opportunities for new learnings, depending on, where you think you're strong in those four behaviors and what you think you might want to bring to your personal environment, your work environment, as a leader or as a team member.
Yeah, that brings up a whole
Am
bunch of
I
things.
kind of going off the rails
No,
here?
no, no, I had a thought, something about how do things change? And I think it's like a Hemingway quote or something like, how do you go bankrupt gradually and then suddenly?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it also reminds me of, we talked earlier, just you and I, about G. Paul Hill. And
Yes.
you hit on a
Yes.
lot of his stuff about very small steps, but also the change harvesting of like, we think things happen in these big bangs,
Yeah.
but it's really like, it's almost like a tipping
Yeah.
point. It's like an accumulation of small things. And all of a sudden you look back and there's like this major.
Right. Right. Right.
But the other thing he always says that you put on too is pay attention. Just like
Yeah.
act of paying attention to what you're doing and how you spend your time and how your tasks break down and those
Mhm.
type of things. And paying attention to those little signals is actually quite powerful.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So another thing that you mentioned in the book, Lead Without Blame, so you had the four C's that you just mentioned,
Yeah.
but there's also, I think we kind of covered those, or is there more to say there?
No, yeah. I
Okay.
mean that if you want more, you can get the book.
Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah,
people
yeah.
want
Now we
more,
know
they
we
can
all
get
have
the
some.
book. Yeah. There's a lot out there about that. We've got Trisha and I actually have a series on the Agile Network where we're kind of working through what does it mean to have courage, what does it mean to have confidence, so on. And there's at the comparative agility site, there's a personal assessment or a leadership team assessment that people can do to say, are we strong in courage or do we need more help there, or whatever it might be. So, yeah,
But I have three other words that were written down here, and these are three things that if I recall correctly in the book, you kind of need all three of these in order for a team to be healthy, and that is purpose, autonomy, and co-intelligence. Do you want to talk a
yeah.
little bit about those?
Yeah, we call those the essential motivators.
Okay.
And what is and whenever I always hear people talk about empowerment and leaders empowering their
I hate
workers,
that
and
term.
it's like the very word empowerment says
I'm giving you
power.
power. I have the power. Yeah,
Yes, it
exactly.
comes from within, right? So the leader's role is how do we create environments so that people can find that power in themselves and find that motivation in themselves to do the good work that we'd like for them to do, right? And we want to support them in doing because people like to achieve, right? So, yeah, purpose, alignment, and context are the three motivators what we call the essential motivators for teams. And it's a little bit borrowed from Dan Pink and his work on individual motivation, but humans are fractal. You see the same things in an organization that you see in a department, that you see and that you see in a team or a family, and that you see in an individual. It just happens that way. And so teams need their own purpose and they need to understand why they have come together. What's the point? Why, what made it seem like a good idea to put all of us in a room and have us work on this thing together, right? and and it needs to be a meaningful purpose, right? What, how are we going to change somebody's world for the better? Or how are we going to enable something to happen? Whatever that might be. So purpose is important. Autonomy is important. People need to that for particularly for motivation and empowerment, autonomy, that sense of um, we together can take action that is meaningful and effective. It's us together doing that. It's our team identity, the autonomy. We have the decision making permissions, the whatever other kind of resources we need. We've got that, and so we can get good work done together. And then finally, co-intelligence, which is this business of, do we have all the skills and abilities and learning that we need to do the work? And how can we rely on each other in a collaborative way or help each other in a collaborative way to make sure we are robust in that we've got what we need? Because when we're confident that we've got the skills, we've got the access to movement, right, of all kinds, and we understand what direction we're going in, that's powerful. Then that's purpose, autonomy, and co-intelligence. And if we only have purpose and autonomy, but no co-intelligence, the quality of our work is not going to be good. So we're going to be, and if we have purpose and co-intelligence, but no autonomy, we're going to get stuck. We aren't going to be able to have the initiative to move forward. If we only have autonomy and co-intelligence with no purpose, then we're just going to make it up. Right? We're not going to be serving some larger purpose. We're just going to do whatever seems like the right thing to do next. So that's why we need all three. And that's why Tricia and I called all three of those out, and that it's at the team level that we need all three of those things. And it's one of the reasons that um, it's the difference between a leader who's a solo person who now has accumulated a bunch of different AIs and they're going to do their thing on their own. Well, those AIs can't really participate. I mean, it's just that individual's autonomy and it's their purpose. And they can feed prompts and things into the AI, but you're going to get whatever you're going to get because it's not going to be teaching each other in the same way. So that's one way to distinguish about when is an AI useful and when do you just need humans. And both are going to be true at different times, but I think that's one of the things that comes to me is because of this triad of essential motivators, um, that is what creates synergy in teams, that what creates the real innovations and the small steps that lead to the big disruption,
Mhm.
right? That's where that comes from.
Yeah, I read a book recently. I think it was Pascal Bornet or something, and I
Yeah.
forget, Irreplaceable or something. It was, and it
Yeah.
talked about, it called it the cubics. There were like three things that it's like these are the things that humans are really good at that machines just can't do.
Right.
And those are and his thing was like the way forward is to focus on those things that only we can do. And like, utilize the technology as you to fill in the gaps. But
Yeah.
yeah, because
Yeah.
if you just rely on the technology, like I hear people say, oh, I had this great idea, and now all you need is an idea and you can just vibe code it. And I'm like, well, that's great. But if you had that great idea and you can vibe code it that easily, why can't somebody else? And now you're competing with them, right? And like, so it's like,
Yeah.
what's your differentiator?
Right.
And human beings are all unique, so we all have our own differentiators. So I feel like you need to lean into that even more now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's yeah.
So back to book topics. There was one last topic well, two topics I wanted to talk about in there, and one was power dynamics. And
Yes.
obviously, formal power dynamics are really easy to recognize, right? The bureaucracy, the titles, those type of things. But I was interested when you talked about informal power dynamics, but then also dominant power dynamics. You want to talk about those a little bit?
Well, the the idea of dominant power dynamics in a team. I mean, we were talking about a certain context. So we're talking about in a team. That means that it's the team is a little bit factionalized
Hmm.
around something. And if there are more team members or more senior team members or more influential team members or whatever it is, and they can override what anybody else on the team wants to do. That's we're talking about dominance power. And the example we give in the book, of course, is the team, or one of the examples we give is a team that I can't remember. I think both Trisha and I have worked with a similar problem. So sometimes I have a hard time. It's like, whose experience did this come from? But where you had team members like some members on the East Coast and some members on Mountain Time or Pacific Time, and the team members on the East, there are more team members on the East Coast. So anytime the team had a vote about like meeting times or things that were influenced by those differences, geographic differences, the East Coast people always won because there were just
Yep.
more of them, right? Well, so they were making decisions about daily meetings or when we're going to do planning or whatever that were impacting the people who's 2, 3 time zones away ability to get their kids to school or pick their kids up from school or do, all these things, but they could continually override. And they weren't recognizing the destructive effect that was having on their team, and how they were impacting some of their teammates' ability to have a good life, right? And so they had to look at that and say, is this a place where we really want to be dominant? Or do we
Yeah.
want to be more collaborative? Do we want to be more a power with instead of a power over? And negotiate these things in a different way. And so that's dominant. It's anytime one party, whether it's a number of people or just one person, can override
Hmm.
whatever anybody else on the team wants or needs. I mean, even needs is more often the case.
That kind of ties into the next topic I want to talk about because it almost feels like it's like a team level of like subconscious bias or unconscious bias where like
Yeah.
I don't think people intentionally do that. They
No.
don't necessarily even realize how it impacts other people, but it's they're so centered on their own thoughts and needs
Right.
that they don't think about other people.
Right. Well, and we talk about the four resilience factors, and there's the collaborative one, building trust and that, and then there's the maybe learning to deal with conflict, and then there's the inclusion and collaborating with diversity and inclusion. Those three are ones that we hear and encounter more often as things we need to pay attention to in teams. The power dynamics one we added in there because we don't find a lot of teams that understand that dynamic that can be at play in any human system. There is that power, and it's not intent, like you say, it may not be intentional, it may not be in anybody's awareness. um, it may just be, well, gosh, those folks, they always get to make these decisions, and I don't understand why, and how is that happening? And, in a voting situation, it becomes more apparent, but there can be a lot of other ways that that happens. Maybe they just declare they have more expertise than anybody else on the team, so they get to make the decision even though other team members may have something to contribute to whatever the decision is, or a perspective on whatever the decision is that they may not be considering. But anytime one party can sort of drive through without consideration of what's going on with the other party, you have that dominance, that power dominance dynamic. And teams largely aren't aware of it. And an outside observer, like a leader, can see it happening more easily.
Hmm.
Always, I mean, you always can see things that are going on with other people that you might not be able to see in yourself, right? Because you have some distance on it and you can begin to see the pattern. Well, so leaders need to be aware of that and help teams become aware of that. That if you really want effective collaborative work, you need to pay attention to what's going on with those dynamics. And are you okay with them or not? Sometimes you're okay with it. Sometimes you say, these two people on the team have been working in this domain for so long and they have such deep understanding. Whatever they think we ought to do, we're going to do that. And then they get to decide. And the rest of the team just follows them. And the team has decided it's okay with that for good reasons, right? So it's not always that these dynamics are wrong. In that instance, we do want those people to have the power over the rest of us to decide what direction we're going. But we want that to be a collaborative decision. We want it to be a power with decision that that's the way we're going to handle this kind of situation. Right. And so that's what makes the difference.
Yeah, the last topic I want to talk about in the book, and we kind of just touched on a little bit, was the inclusivity part, which I found very
Yeah.
interesting. But the thing that I found most interesting about it was like first part is the awareness that there's issues, but the bigger part was actually being proactive about it and actually taking action. And I
Mhm.
feel like that's where sometimes people fall down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we aren't maybe used to doing that. We're not maybe as used, or we may be used to advocating for some people and not other people. I
Hmm.
mean, it's habit, and we all have habits, right? And so it doesn't help to get too judgmental about it, but it does help to raise awareness about it. I noticed that as a team, we've got these two junior members of our team, and we're consistently talking over them. We are not hearing their ideas. And maybe it could be any number of inclusion issues going on with that. Why we are, it might be just that they're junior. It might be some other difference that they have. Maybe they have an accent that's still hard for most of us to listen through and understand what they're saying. Um, but we can fix that, right? We can change that. And we do want and get to the place where we know we do want to hear what they have to offer on this discussion or that discussion because they're going to have a perspective that's important. And as I've gotten older, I've become more and more sensitive to the ways in which older people often get dismissed. And the wealth of life experience and wisdom we will just ignore because somebody looks like an older person. That doesn't really make sense if you stop and think about it. But our brains are we have the gift that we have these brains that are super good at categorizing things. And and that's great for some things. I want to sort the things on my desk and put them in the place where I'll be able to find them later, right? I can categorize. The books go here, the paperwork goes there, this goes, that's great. But when we start using those categories to make judgments that have a negative impact on other people or on our ability to get new information. It can be a way to block new information if we just say, oh, well, I don't know what category that fits in, or that's in a category that I don't pay attention to, or whatever that might be. And so inclusive collaboration means learning as a team. How do we get past that? How do we intentionally notice when we're being exclusive
Hmm.
for whatever that reason is and make a decision about, is that reasonable? Do we want to be exclusive that for that category of stuff, whether it's human stuff or other stuff. um and again, I mean, like you pointed out earlier, it's about awareness. It's
Yeah.
about paying attention. And it can be tiring. So we'll need breaks now and then, and we'll have to give each other some slack and some grace from time to time when we forget or, can't, it's out of habit or something, we fall back on some old way. So we also need to be compassionate with each other while we're learning, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on something. It's like human nature to put things into buckets
Yeah.
because it saves brain power, right? You don't have to, you can treat the whole bucket the same and you don't have to treat
Right.
things as individuals,
Yeah.
individual items or people or whatever
Yeah.
it is. But yeah, it does have some downsides. And I think to your
Right.
point, like part of it is it's not necessarily wrong that you put them in the bucket. You just got to know they're in that bucket and it's actually an individual and you can pull them out of the bucket and interact with them as an individual.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Every day when I leave the house, I rely on my categories that tell me these are the places where I can drive my car, and these are the places where I don't want to drive my car.
Right.
I don't drive my car on sidewalks. I have categories of things that are on the ground. There are things that are streets. There are things that are sidewalks. There are things that, and I do different things in those different areas. And yeah, and so there are categories that we put things in that are very useful to us. But if we start using them I'm only going to drive on sidewalks, that's not good.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Or there's a huge wreck and I need to get out of the way fast, but I can't go on the sidewalk because I never drive on sidewalks. Well, in this instance, if it's wide enough, maybe I'm going to need to do that. I mean, so being able to rethink, not being rigidly instructed by categories always, but be open enough to say, this time I got to move to a new category.
Yeah, Trisha put me onto a book, I think by Adam Grant. Was it called Rethink or something
Oh,
like
yeah,
that?
yeah,
I forget what it
yeah,
was. It's something like that. Yeah, that was all about
yeah,
rethinking your assumptions and changing.
right. Well, and rethinking your assumptions is a part of unlearning and a part of learning. And yeah, yeah, it goes back around. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Lots of good discussion. The last thing I want to end with is a question that I ask all my guests, and that is, can you tell me about an experiment that you tried recently and what you learned?
Yes, I can. I'm trying to decide if I want to. Um, I I have a condition where over the years my hair has gotten thinner and thinner and thinner to the point that the last couple of years I mostly wear wigs or hats or whatever. I recently decided to shave off all my hair
Huh?
as an experiment to
Hmm.
see. I see other people who've just taken all their hair off, right? And I see them and I think, I wonder how that would be. And I just decided to give myself the experiment. Hair grows back,
Hmm.
right? So if at least some parts of my hair will grow back, some won't never. But I can always get that back and I can always wear a wig. I can make other choices. But this gives me the choice to not have to, which
Hmm.
is not a choice that I felt like I had before. And I wanted that freedom to just say, I don't have to put anything on my head today if I don't want to. If it feels right to me, I don't have to put it. I'm not going to take my wig off and show you right now, but you may see me at conferences in the future or whatever. And I'm going to give this a try for like 8 or 10 weeks. I've got a time, it's time bound, my experiment. My hypothesis is that I'm going to like it as much as I liked it on the first day and we'll keep doing it, but I don't know that for sure yet. So my experiment is that it's very personal,
Hmm.
but I actually, I experiment a lot with a lot of different things. We also experimented this year with taking a lot of different things from around our house and making a uh, Christmas village that very different from any Christmas village anybody has ever seen. For instance, we have a little gingerbread house with a dragon coming out of it, and some things like that, and lots of little animals that we found around the house and stuff. So we're constantly trying things new in our household, and I do that in my business as well because I think that keeps it fresh and it enables me to do risky things. Someone recently told me about a heuristic, and I'm sorry that I don't know who to cite this from because I can't remember who the person who told me about it said that they got it from, and so I apologize for that. It was going to be anonymous from now on. It wasn't generated originally by me, but that there are decisions you make and risks you take because they're very low risk.
Mhm.
Today I'm going to use a different coffee cup than I normally use.
Mhm.
Big deal, right? I can do that. I can easily roll that back tomorrow if I want. It's not a big deal. Haircuts. I can
Mhm.
try a new haircut. Hair grows.
Yep.
It may take a little longer. I may have to live with it a little longer. The risk might be that I really hate it for a while, but that's a kind of risk. And then there's like tattoos.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
if I do this, I'm
You
gonna
gotta
have to
really
live with
want it.
it for a very long time. And if I want to change it, it's gonna be painful and
Yeah.
right. So I've been playing with that a lot about what is the nature of this risk, and is it a risk I'm willing to take, and am I willing to try the experiment around it? And so I'll leave you with that one.
Uh,
I think it's really helpful to
no,
me.
thanks a lot for sharing and thanks for being vulnerable.
Yeah, sure.
Um, yeah, I think it's worth having a very brief conversation before you go, just about what makes for a good experiment, because I don't think I've actually like said that out loud on the podcast, even though like
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
experiments. But I mean, I think the three I took three things out of our your little conversation on that. One was to have a hypothesis that you're going to test. Like, do I like this or
Mhm.
not? Right? Have some clear criteria for what success is,
Right.
what's not.
Right.
Being time boxed, so it's not going on forever. We're clearly defining we're going to try it for a certain amount of time. And then also trying to design the experiment in such a way that you're okay with the worst thing that happens. So some kind of safety around it of like,
Right.
if I cut off my hair and I don't like it, I can wear a wig in the meantime and eventually it'll grow back and okay.
Yeah. 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 And it's the safe to fail thing that people talk about, right? It's the safe risks. But taking the risks, not taking the risk means you never explore anything new. So
Mhm.
you have to be willing to step out sometimes to do it. So being clear about what's okay for you right
Yeah.
now
Well, I
is
mean, it's still like even like shaving your head is probably outside your comfort zone a little bit.
yeah, it was.
The first
Yeah.
time you look in the mirror, it's probably like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was helped by my hairdresser who did it like a quarter inch at a time. He's
Oh,
like,
okay.
is this short enough? Is this short enough? And I just found as he was going on, it's like, no, I want it shorter. I want it shorter.
Hmm.
So, yeah. So having somebody there who can support you in your experiment, I think is also, another good piece of advice around that. Who else is going to be there to support you in running your experiment?
Yeah, having
Yeah.
support is good. Yeah.
Yeah, always. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It's been a great conversation.
This has been wonderful. I really enjoyed it, Sam. I mean, I enjoyed our conversation when we met, and I knew that I was going to enjoy this. I've been looking forward to it. So, yeah.
All right. That's it for today's episode of the LabVIEW Experiment. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments or questions, head over to thelabviewexperiment.com and drop me a note. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the LV Experiment.